Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. We are chronicling a day today, being in transit and returning after. Terse methodologies of return. Anyways, two joints to share today. Somewhat symbiotic and related, but here's the first joint. There's a term, there's a phrase, there's a colloquialism, a euphemism that is, quote unquote, the devil's advocate, end quote. And so by that, it's meant somebody who is arguing the opposite side of the issue. If people are in agreement, people are part of a community, and like discussing the rationale for advocating and promoting the well-being of that particular principle, that particular experience of that community, the term devil's advocate is utilized when somebody from the community says, well, all right, this is what we all believe, but let's look at the other side. Let's play quote unquote devil's advocate. Let's presume to believe in the contradictory of what we are agreeing with today, so that we can further strengthen our own argument for those who hold that contrary opinion. Devil's advocate. Some people relish playing the devil's advocate, thinking about the other side, intrinsically even longing for the other side. The term devil's advocate, I'm rolling up my pant legs right now after directly returning from travels. The term devil's advocate also is utilized to describe lawyers whose profession is to be able to argue for the other side. That's one thing that's fundamental and taught in law school, even before law school, is to master the binaries, to minus, to master the flip side of the argument, so that a lawyer, a well-trained, well-practiced, well-cultivated lawyer is able to intellectually, compassionately, convincingly argue a certain side of a circumstance, to the point where the audience is like, that's obvious, no question about it. Exactly, yes, that's right, he's right. Then, on another occasion, be hired, or be at least to be able to be hired to intellectually, compassionately, and convincingly argue exactly the exact opposite side of that situation, whereby the audience, even the same audience, says, of course, that's it. Absolutely, he's right. The other day, they were 100% certain of the antithetical argument based upon the presentation of the lawyer. Then on the other day, the same lawyer presents the other side of the argument, and audience is similarly convinced. That's the devil's advocate. That's the skill set that lawyers are taught, are trained in cultivating, the ability to look at a situation, look at the different sides, to recognize the legitimate argument, the legitimate rationale for each side, and to be able to significantly, convincingly make that argument. Detailed points, logic, priorities, and otherwise. Devil's advocate, to the point where lawyers are accused of being soulless, of having no soul, of standing for nothing, because lawyers can argue anything. And lawyers value a culture of being able to argue anything, to the point that the question becomes, what do you actually stand for? What do you actually believe in? Because basically the one congruency amidst all of that is the lawyers getting paid. The lawyers being hired for that service. And it doesn't have to be monetary. It could be just status. It could be just legendariness, civil rights attorneys and otherwise. One day advocating for an ethnic, religious, or other quote unquote minority convincingly in front of the Supreme Court, revolutionizing law itself in the land, and the next day going to the country club and breaking bread with the perpetrators, the violators of those civil rights, and making economic deals and investments with such kinfolk. Business. Devil's advocate. So, point is, kinfolk who's able to make arguments on either side of a situation and be accused or being suspect of being baseless, of having no virtues, no ethics. It's all about what the individual lawyer can do, how brilliant the individual lawyer is. So anyways, that's devil's advocate. Now, there's this fierce rivalry, at least let the lawyers tell it. I don't know how much doctors actually care. I don't think doctors talk about lawyers as much as lawyers talk about doctors. That's my experience, but I'm somewhat, I don't know now at this point. I probably had just as much interaction with doctors today at this point in my life that I have with lawyers after three and a half years of law school. I've had 20 plus years of interactions with doctors, because lawyers don't spend a lot of time with me these days, at least American lawyers. So doctors and lawyers, there's a fierce rivalry amongst lawyers towards doctors. There's a certain insecurity amongst us. I've spoken about this before, but my point here is this: if lawyers are doctors, or if lawyers are devil's advocates, and have this ability of making arguments, of swaying opinion and judgment amongst people, public opinion, public policy, law. If that's the realm and the nature of doctors, then come, let's talk. How about this? The sun is setting. Let's wrap this up quick. How about that? Yeah. If that's the realm of lawyers as devil's advocates, then what about doctors? So first of all, it's generally recognized even amongst lawyers, which is probably why lawyers talk about doctors further often. It's generally recognized that doctors tend to be further powerful than lawyers. OD, particularly these days. It was 20 years ago. Even perhaps a little bit, few years before that, amidst the height of lawyerism in the world. Probably about the 11th of September, to be honest. That was probably the height of lawyerism within the world republic. And since then, I think there's been significant deterioration in the credibility of government as a phenomenon, increasing reliance upon medicine as basic sustenance in the health and well-being. And because of that, like the height of lawyerism worldwide has seemingly reduced in recent decades, whereas doctors have ascended significantly in recent decades. Doctors were already generally above lawyers, but there was still like a strong argument for lawyers at this point. Like, I don't even know how many people even talk about lawyers. It's about doctors, it's about engineering, it's about STEM, and that's all outside of the realm of lawyering. Lawyering is arts and the humanities. Doctor is increasingly mathematics, science. And lawyers are renowned for not having the strongest mathematical skills, to be honest. He can talk Greek and Roman, Latin for days. But anyway, all right. So if lawyers are devil's advocates, what about doctors? If doctors have a greater earthly power than lawyers, that would suggest that doctors have some further immediacy, some further proximity with the devil. Ooh, D. If we're just looking at that as the nature of corruption, and that's what power is it absolute power corrupts absolutely? So if doctors are generally further powerful than lawyers, that means that doctors have further proximity with the devil than lawyers do. What up? So what that would be if lawyers are doctors advocates. How about this? Doctors are devil's escort, dancing with the devil. You heard that one before. So doctors are like the escort, the dance accompaniment of the devil, which means that further, the advocate is for hire. The advocate is here and there. The advocate can be on retainer and always available on call, or the doctor could be on a case-by-case basis. ad hoc, so to speak. So in that sense, the lawyer can be on the spot and like advocating for the devil and be all up in it, and then out, done, the case is over, now vacation for a while. Whereas with the doctor, there seems to be a further like on-call situation. Put that beeper on, and be at the ready. So further proximity, further responsiveness, further obligation in that relation. Oh, we getting gritty with this one. So that further proximity can translate to that scenario of being an escort. Not necessarily committed for life or whatever, but like it's an ongoing kind of relationship, an ongoing interaction, an ongoing intimacy, to be honest, body, anatomy, physiology, the ins and outs of the bodily experience and even the life experience. Further intense and immediate than what lawyers do. Lawyers deal with predominantly behavior principles, whereas with doctors it's the body, like beyond words. So further intimacy, it's escort service. We're not going to be explicit or whatever in terms of specifying what that actually means. We're just saying dancing with the devil continuously, escort a relationship. So that's that. Now it goes further. What else is there? The clergy, and from the clergy into the cult experience. And in that realm, what we're saying is the spouse, Iki, the oh no, I know what it is. Okay, yeah, all right, the consort of the devil. So it's not the spouse, it's the consort. And by that it's meant, oh, this is actually it. This is it. It's the consort. So religious clergy, and then all the way to the extremity of cult. That is the consort of the devil. So the consort, actually, we're going to talk about what we're talking about first before defining what we mean by consort. So particularly, and this is with due respect to religious clergy, but this is the facts. This is like the nasty of spiritual path. It's this. Religious clergy, across the board, regardless of what tradition it is, religious clergy walk a path and gain a knowledge and a wisdom. That's truth. That's transcendent. That is awesome and miraculous. Incroyable. Clergy attain to a level of that wisdom, that truth. The challenge with that is that in learning this truth, this wisdom, it is acknowledging the fallacies, the corruptions, the duplicities, the atrocities that exist within conventional leadership. And so to continue on that path of truth and wisdom requires letting go of those atrocities, letting go of the relationship with those atrocities, the advantages, the comforts, even just the sustenance from those atrocities, letting that go. That's the nature of that wisdom. Living in the garden and come what may. Across the board, that's what the religions teach. Garden. And clergy know that. It's extremely difficult to do. For a man like myself, who is without an immediate wife and immediate children living in my house who I have to provide for, let alone for a man who does have a wife, who has children, has responsibilities, obligations to provide for, to have that knowledge, but then at the same time to have those responsibilities, it requires a negotiation, it requires a compromise, it requires a avoidance of that truth, of the continuation of that path in order to stay within society and stay in the relationships, the connections, the trade, exchange with the corruptions, with the atrocities. And in doing that, there is a betrayal. And it's necessary. It's across the board. Each religion, every religion, Islam, Israel, Christianity, Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist, across the board, indigenous, Baha'i, Sikhi, across the board, there is that betrayal for the sake of being of the earth. Each tradition talks about this. And it's extremely difficult. But in that compromise, and we can call it betrayal, and that's not shade. We can call it compromise because it's a nicer term. In that compromise, that clergy, the ones who attain that wisdom, become essentially consorts of the devil. That's nasty, and it's difficult to perceive avoiding that. But that's the nature of the compromise. And it's that severe because the wisdom and the knowledge of that truth is so huge. It's so intense. To make just a little step away from that is huge. And it is a continual thing. It's an everyday thing. Almost to the extent of marriage, but it's a consort. It is not full spousal situation, but still subordinate. Because even with that knowledge and wisdom, the clergy, regardless of what tradition it is, in some way has to abide by the will and the dishonesty, the unfairness, the injustice, the atrocities of whatever potentates are running the materiality of the earth at that time. Whether it's dictators, whether it's militia, whatever it is, the clergy, in order to maintain that safety, comfort, security for the family and whatever communities around the clergy, have to kowtow in some way. And that the faces change of those militia and whatever else. And that kowtow doesn't have to be severe. It doesn't have to be bowing down, paying tribute, or flying signs or whatever else. But in the mere silence of not calling out those atrocities and injustices, and the political spin that clergy do of pointing at the enemies and blaming the enemies, and additionally, even as congenial and gentle as possible and quietly as possible, that's still the compromise. It's still the betrayal of the truth and the wisdom that says, yo, call it out, plain and simple, come what may. And that becomes the consortium, or the consorting, or becoming a consort of the devil. It's not the particular person or any leader that's the militia leader, the dictator, or whatever else, the president, CEO, whoever else. It's the compromise to the earthly powers that are governing or influencing the sharing, the distribution of materiality in the earthly realm. And like I said, that face can change, the name can change, the personage can change from day to day, from year to year, whatever. But the clergy maintain a consistent, continual subordination to that relationship, and that is being a consort of the devil. And it can only be slightly. It can only be slightly. It can be severe, but it can only be slightly too. And even then, it's still the implications of it, because the wisdom is so tremendous, the knowledge is so tremendous. Even just straying, I won't say committing to straying, but resigning to continually stray from the thorough 24 whatever practice of that truth, just for a small part, has huge implications for one who's invested with that type of knowledge and wisdom. So it's likened to becoming a consort of the devil, and that's across the board. That's not shade. I keep saying that, and I don't know if people actually recognize what I'm saying. This is not condemning, it's not condemnation. It's just communicating the actuality and understanding the conditions. And there's a spectrum. There are severities. Some become woefully corrupt and like become thorough, huge consorts of devil, to the point of maybe being categorized as concubines or otherwise. And that's where we get into the realm of the cult, because the cult become further attached to that type of arrangement and that type of betrayal, in an increasingly perhaps insidious way. But it's still some of the same, because it's further intense than what doctors or lawyers are at. But at the same time, well, it is what it is. So that's that. Wadi. I have to remember the second joint to share. It's been a long day. It's been a long day. What else? There was something else. It was comparatively lighter. I think I said it was congruent, symbiotic, I said even perhaps. So I'm getting into that realm of cognition, of like recall and like retracing what I just said to try to think about. And after to do that, that's an indication that, yo, fatigue. If it ain't that deep, it ain't that deep. Dancing with the Devil. Talked about the different categories. There was something else that was comparatively light. If I had said the word, that might have helped the recollection of this moment. As you can see, it's dark now. So let's be mindful of this as we return into this discipline, this routine. See the sweat, this routine of spiritual practice, which is a big part of the solution. Additional theater. Talking about doctors and lawyers. Okay. Right, okay. Actually, I don't know if this was the second thing or if this was just the second part of the first thing, to be honest. I'll say it whilst I think about it, though. Okay. Some of it. All right. Now, that being said, part of the purpose for me saying that is this. Actually, there's actually a purpose. That wasn't it, all of it itself. How about that? There's actually a purpose to this, or a further purpose. To recognize this. For my personal path in life, what is recognized? How about we do this? Some of this. There we go. In my personal path, my personal paths, or personal paths. No, it's not personal paths. It's personal path. This is not Tov. All right. In my personal path in life, this is what is observed. An ascending experience path through each of those realms. So formal education in law, of being a devil's advocate, working with devil's advocates, studying with devil's advocate, and additionally, without the intention of necessarily being a devil's advocate, but guess what? It doesn't matter. It's done. If I pass the bar, or if I take the bar, or otherwise, it's comparatively inconsequential. I've learned the craft. I've been taught the craft. I'm in it. whether I like it or not. That's me. Well, all I can do as an official quote unquote devil's advocate, all I can do is be as true to God, the Most High Elohim, as I can be. Let that be as pronounced as can be. Let me live as thoroughly as can be, so there's as little question as can be concerning where I stand, what I'm about, who I am, beyond simply being a devil's advocate. And that's what I strive to do to this day for over 20 years. I can't let go. I can't relinquish that classification or that indemnification. I can't, that stigma or that credential or whatever of being a devil's advocate. I can't let, it's not mine to let go. It's with me. Like the brands on my arm, and additionally, it's for life. It's further than the brands on my arm, to be honest. Literally, it's deeper than the brands on my arm. Being a devil's advocate, even not for the United States, not for the Constitution. It's beyond that nature. It's understanding lawyerism itself, regardless of what country it is. How the law works, how lawyering works. The craft of lawyering is devil's advocate. And through the years, I can be looked at as and seen as and intending as being an advocate for black nationalism, for sovereignty for mixed heritage people, even when I talk about Rastafari sovereignty. And additionally, that's all forms of lawyering, the craft of lawyering, the establishment, lawyering, the establishment of government. And additionally, that's all the realm of lawyers as devil's advocate. Constructing society, constructing governance, laws, constitution, compacts and contracts and treaties. That's all lawyering. And that's in the realm of the devil's advocate, so to speak. And that's what I'm trained as formally. And there's no letting that go in this earthly life. All I can do is strive to do better than just that. And just like finding comfort in the advantages of doing that at the detriment of others. All I can do is do my best to be very plain and pronounced, not even worrying about what people think, but being true to God, the Most High, as best as I can be, and share that as honestly as I can and as clearly as I can, so that others can see that as clearly as others can, so as not to make false judgments, false accusations, false condemnations accordingly for other people's sake. But I can't shrug off that thing of being a devil's advocate, whether I like it or not. And it's not for the United States. It's for the craft of lawyering. So there's that. Now, again, in my personal path, because, and all thanks and praise the Most High for everything, because I do my best as I can each stage of my life, every day of my life, to be honest, amidst the pitfalls and everything, every time I tripped up and everything, to this day, I continue to do my best, make amends, and do what is guided and commanded from teachers and lawyers and healers before me. Because I do that, after graduating from law school, what is observed is that intrinsically, I also go through the process, and each one is a pledge process, but I also go through the pledge process of the doctors, of the devil's escort. I don't have a medical degree, don't need a medical degree. It's a craft. It's a craft of healing. There are all different types of traps and temptations and everything else involved with it, but the craft of healing, there are certain traits that are comparatively universal, whether it's the most advanced technology and methodologies of Western medicine to the most ancient of native, natural, medicinal methodologies. There are certain synonymous traits: patience, empathy, listening, quiet, meditation, plants, water, elements, balance. There's a mathematics that's shared amidst all the medicine. And in my process of over 10 years, how many years do I put this formally? The last time I've been locked up in a psych ward was, wow, it's been a while now. 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I'm trying to think what's the longest stint that I've been outside of the psych ward. 2007 to 2012. So this is actually the longest stint I've been outside of the psych ward. Yeah, officially, since graduating from law school. I got locked up 2 months after graduating, officially, formally, I guess, for the concluding occasion, my third graduation, and then 2 months later, I was put in lockup. So that was my first occasion, and my formal introduction, formal orientation day into the practice of medicine and being the devil's escort, and that learning goes all the way up until the most recent forced incarceration, abduction, molestation in a psych ward, which was about 5 years ago. So that would be about 17 years. Yeah, 17 years of education, formal education in the practice of medicine. To the point where I don't know if the one joint 5 years ago is my formal graduation, because it seems that doctors are able to recognize there's less to be learned from such interactions on both sides, and it's further conducive on all sides not to resort to those type of methodologies, which is why we're experiencing what we're experiencing on the streets, rather than that vitriol and that animosity being articulated and manifested through the auspices of the psychiatrist. Now we're getting it from the streets, because we've actually presumably gone past the realm of the doctors. And I'll get to that in a second, God willing. But the point is that in that process of 17 years, there were intensive studies, involuntary studies of being locked in solitary units in psych wards, in general population psych wards, and that's a strong term, but that's generally what is described. I mean, that's generally the situation. In halfway houses, ongoing, I mean, just a number of different scenes. Seeing it like that's the residency of seeing the practice of medicine, learning directly from doctors the techniques of calming, of stillness, of meditation, of regulation, of nutrition, and additionally recognizing the extent of what the body can do, what the body can endure. Going without food for weeks, literally. Going without water for weeks, literally. Not because the doctors enforced that, said you can't drink for this. Not because of onus or want on my side, but because of the conditions. My spiritual training at that time was like, don't consume anything. Don't absorb anything voluntary from what is being produced at this moment. Fast. That's ancient wisdom. Fast. Clear the mind. Don't absorb the poisons that are being offered. That vinegar on a rag and otherwise. Is that hyperbole? Do you believe in resurrection? Those are intense study programs. For 17 years. We learn. We study what the doctors do. We recognize your doctors have knowledge. Respect that. How do the doctors get this? How do the doctors get to be in this position to do this over me when I presumably haven't done anything? I haven't broken any laws. I haven't threatened anybody. I haven't hurt anybody directly to my knowledge. Presumably. How are the doctors able to do this? And what are the doctors doing? And we learn. The spiritual path gives us the patience to learn and study what the doctors are doing. To learn something. I can't say I know everything the doctors do, and actually do just as much as anybody else does, because everybody knows everything. It's only a matter of question. It's only a matter of question. It's only a question of how much we remember. It's only a matter of how much we remember. So we learn a lot from the doctors, to the point where we go through that pledge process to be effectively devil's consorts. Devil's escorts. That's the second level. Devil's escorts of dancing with the devil, of learning that knowledge of physiology, the intimacy of the body, the influence, nutrients, and then relating that into our spiritual knowledge that we learn through that process too of chakras, sphirot, the senses, the pranas, and additionally samadhi, breathing, yoga. It's all healing. And to the point of being healers, we are officially healers. We are medicine people. Legitimately. There's so much for us to continue to learn, but we are medicine people. That is our purpose for being here, is healing. Our specialty particularly is civilizational healing. At the uber macro as well as the immediate micro nature. So we go through that pledge process. It's a pledge process. Those atrocities, that torture and everything, it's a pledge process. When heaven is preparing to confer on a man great responsibilities, it first imposes upon that man great trials and tribulations. It's about how much we're willing to accept that. Be at peace with that. Cultivate the equilibrium and continue with the harmony, the stillness and the movement with the nature. Tao. What up? Pledge process to get to be an escort of the devil, but it doesn't stop there, because obviously, like I said just a minute ago, in that process also we study scriptures. We study the spiritual, the heavenly law from different traditions. We officially become members within spiritual communities, learning increasingly the experience, the discipline, the activity, the leadership and methodologies of spiritual communities, clergy. And through that process, over 20 years since graduating law school, become increasingly versed and skilled in the craft of religiosity and that realm of being devil's consorts. Udi, am I saying that about myself? Just like being a devil's advocate. If people can understand what I'm saying with that, it's beyond the intentionality. It's what it's what the training is. And all we can do in going through that training is continually be devoted to the Most High Elohim, to recognize the Most High Elohim God by the name that we know God. Honor that guidance, honor that relationship, honor our guidance, honor our relationship, and honor all our relations. To deny being a devil's advocate or devil's escort or devil's consort is actually to substantiate the accusation and the suspicion. To acknowledge that as people understand it, and to emphasize a truth beyond that. That's comparatively the honest response. That's the honest proclamation. That is what we share. Wadi. This was going to someplace too again. It's a little warm actually. Again, the sunset time zone. Noticing that. Cloud coverage. Interesting. Okay. Just observing the conditions, the natural conditions. I mentioned this before, that noticing, just doing this actually, to be honest, sitting here and not moving for like hours, literally talking for hours at this window as the day is setting, noticing the temperature is getting warmer. How is this? Wait, it's actually darker. There's less light, and it's actually warmer. It feels warmer. So what is observed again is that when the day, and this is the working hypothesis, but it's that when the day sets and it gets dark, then the moisture in the immediate environment, trees and additionally, is not burned off as much by the daylight, and so accumulates in the near atmosphere, in the near skies. And when that moisture accumulates, clouds formation, even just a misty overcast, in doing that, it keeps the warmth being generated at that moment inside of that layer, like a blanket. Even just within the frame of an hour or two, as the day set is continuing and it gets dark and that moisture accumulates in the environment. And so, even though it's getting darker and there's less direct heat from the soleil, the warmth, and particularly because the bodies are already warm and active, um, now there's a blanket over it, and so it's keeping it in, just like within the winter that we know of. So I'm experiencing that as well. Now this sweat is coming from walking and causing warmth already during the day, but I'm feeling a warmth of the body at the moment that I didn't feel when I first sat down. So interesting. It's been almost an hour or so since arriving here. Hmm. um, wow. Now I'm struggling to remember the first thing I was talking about. I was just talking about devil advocate, devil's escort, devil's consort. All thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim. I was talking about something about civilization before. I have to remember what it was specifically. I remember there's 4 joints to it or something like that. But what is occurring, what is being shared with me right now, is the purpose and the emphasis of oneness, of non-antagonization, non-disassociation, non-villainization, pro-unity, pro-oneness, pro-yeet, pro-ek-onkar, pro-echad, pro-Allah, pro-life of all our relations. What am I talking about? All this generality. Yeah. Kumbaya. What are you talking about? In that wisdom, that truth that I talked about before, a second ago, a while ago, a minute ago, amidst this betrayal of compromise, to stay in this life, to stay in relationship with convention, society, and all the trappings and temptations, and continuing to do our best, and to heed the teachings that we are provided in this life, but still not epitomizing it, still falling short. In this compromise of life, to recognize that we have no enemy. We have no enemy. We have no hostility. We have no animosity. We have no hatred. We have no vengeance. We have no revenge for any being, towards any being. We do our best not to get mad, not to blame, and not to punish any being. We stand for well-being. We do our best to protect and serve well-being, to prevent harms against well-being. And in doing so, no hostility, no anger, no hatred, no vengeance, no revenge, no animosity. Purpose beyond ourselves and with all ourselves. Patience. Patience is the foundation of all blessings in this life. Patience is one of the things that gets me through law school without me knowing. Patience is one of the things that I keenly learn in my studies of medicine. Patience is something that is continually repeated within our spiritual teachings of the earth. Within every scripture, patience. Patiently persevere. Explicitly and implicitly subtle, patience is thoroughly advocated through the teachings of the Most High Elohim, through all the different scriptures of truth. Patience. The foundation of all blessings in this life. Patience. To experience that equilibrium further, closely, thoroughly. Equilibrium. And from that equilibrium, with that patience, continuing into the movement, the harmony, with the movement around us and within us. Patience, calmness, mindfulness, balance, remembrance, relationship, purpose, healing, spirit, creator, purpose, divine, intention, discipline, daily attunement, patience makes perfection. Practice makes perfect. Patience makes perfection. All thanks and praise to the Most High. We're going to keep it at this point. That's what I have to share. Pretty is pretty. Pretty is pretty. Pretty is pretty. Pretty is pretty. Pretty comes and goes. Patience endures. Gambaru. And forgiveness is the greatest offering of oneself. All thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. And the reminder, of course, the reminder is this. Something for consideration. What you're trying to think about before. Here it is. Right at the end. Of course. It is intended. There's sentience that exists much further than my ego. And there's sentience that is further knowledgeable about what we share. And what we observe, there's sentience that is greater than my ego that receives what we share and is able to plan and even share with us anticipatorily. Sometimes actually rather manipulative and challengingly, and then sometimes beautifully and motherly, fatherly, as parents do, as loving parents do, knowing the children better than the children know themselves, and knowing that the children have greater recollection of the heavens than the parents do at that moment. Respect and love. So, as I'm reminded of what I was trying to think about before, right at the end, that's evidence, awareness of that sentience. I didn't think about that. Something else happens, something else, someone else, some being else says, here you go, remember this? Right. His Majesty Haile Selassie I, Her Majesty Wazara Manen. This is what I was trying to remember before. It's plain and simple. There's no shade. It's love. Manifestation. Love. Truth. This is the consideration. Today, when I wear the t-shirt with the image of His Majesty Haile Selassie I, some people know who he is and say, Selassie I, oh, Rastafari. Interesting, numerous kinfolk, some of whom one would not expect. Not necessarily just to have that knowledge, but to have that heart to say it in public. Kinfolk that you would not expect. Kinfolk that would easily otherwise be immediately labeled down pressa, devil, and otherwise. Wadat, be careful about them condemnations. So, all that being said, to be honest, comparatively few people recognize that image. To be honest, few people of today's generation, particularly the youngsters, and very often many presume it to be Bob Marley. Many kinfolk today, young generation, is much further knowledgeable and literate, aware of Bob Marley, even Bob Marley songs, and additionally talking to the brethren on the street of the 7th generation of electricity. You know, Bob Marley, I fucks with Bob Marley, particularly when I'm smoking herb. That's brethren on the street today. This generation, young brethren, young blood, know Bob Marley. Do you know who Rastafari is? No, don't say Rastafari, because that's too recognizable. Say, do you know who don't say His Majesty, Haile Selassie I. No hints, little hints. Haile Selassie I. Do you know who that is? Who is that? Thank you. I can share now the teachings of His Majesty. spark, seed, seen. Now, that's the condition today. That's the experience today. Those are the probabilities today around the world. In the past 50 years, there are fewer kinfolk who are further recognizable than Bob Marley, particularly in a favorable way, in a grassroots way, which says a lot, rather than a propagandized way, even though technically Bob Marley is also part of the mass distribution methodologies of imperialism. The message, particularly further, is one of spiritual awakening amidst all the other confusions and pollutions, to be honest. All respect due to Robert Nesta Marley. Celebrated around the world today, well known around the world today, even further, generally speaking, than the man who Robert Nesta Marley emulates and honors, His Majesty Haile Selassie I. Such is the nature. Further people are familiar with Alhaj Malik al-Shabazz Malcolm X than with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Such is the nature. Oftentimes, the spiritual leader who sparks the imagination and encouragement and guidance of a charismatic leader is less known by the masses, because the charismatic leader is able to carry that message further directly to the masses. Diganawida and Hiawatha is another example from over 1,000 years ago. So, point is, at some point, eventually, what we can recognize, what we can anticipate, what we can prepare for is a day when people are further aware of, knowledgeable of, literate with the example and teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie I than the personage or the lyrics of Robert Nesta Bob Marley. And it's not shade, it's not shade. It's recognizing the nature of the teachings, the nature of the example. And it's something, if we're going to be honest, to recognize that Bob Marley himself would advocate for people to be further familiar with His Majesty Haile Selassie I than with Bob Marley himself. Would not Bob Marley say that himself? So the consideration is recognizing a day, eventually, at some point, knowing how wisdom and truth works. The teachings that His Majesty the life that His Majesty Haile Selassie I lives, having a further enduring resonance through the chambers, through the generations. 1 second. Veritas borrow, forgiveness, Ahimsa, Ubuntu, Oedipus, Hell, Shiva, Mokta, Buddha, Samantha, Shima, Shivana. Yeah, we on this DEFCON orange right now, so all these little noises and whatever else underneath the radar screen, we have to be further attentive to that, because most of it, generally speaking, is comparatively innocuous. I won't say benign, but comparatively innocuous. I'll use that term for this moment. Some of it, to be honest, is communications of like, yo, shut up, stop talking. We're tired of listening to this right now. Serious, facts, no cap. Some of it is testing the waters. How much can we push? How much further can we get? How much can we nibble away? And then some of it is preparation for bad things. So we have to be further attentive amidst these conditions. So talking about the example of His Majesty having further resonance within the generation, it's particularly the life and the lessons from the life that have the resonance beyond the charisma. Both Robert Nesta Marley and Haile Selassie have tremendous charisma. And it's not a comparison of who's higher or lesser or whatever, but understanding that in the first stages of an audience, particularly generations and civilizations, there's a greater influence, particularly given how technology and messaging is distributed through media and additionally. It's like the one that is heavy with the charisma tends to get the further attention in the short run. And in the short run, we're talking about spans of generations at this point. So in the short run, in the first few generations, because Robert Nesta Marley and Haile Selassie live during the same period. Robert Nesta Marley is somewhat younger, considerably younger, but still living in the same generation, and only returning to the ancestors about the same time frame as well. So in terms of like the span of civilizations, both are very much in the same zone. And so it's only been a few generations since both walked these roads of creation on this earth. And so it's very reasonable, it's very rational, logical, that most people would hear about Bob Marley than Haile Selassie, because Haile Selassie is a world leader. What he shares is something increasingly substantive. It requires further literacy. People have to be introduced through studying books and stuff like that primarily. It's not through popular culture, so it's not as accessible to youth and children. It's not as, it doesn't circulate as much amongst the proletariat, amongst the masses at the grassroots level. And I have to think about another word besides grassroots. We've been working on that for a while. But the teachings of His Majesty have a different nature than the music and the teachings of Bob Marley. So the nature of it is that the younger people are further, the masses of younger people are further introduced to the music of Bob Marley than the life and the teachings of Haile Selassie, His Majesty Haile Selassie. So that's what people learn, and then there's a resonance when people learn that. It's a spiritual awakening, because that's what Bob Marley is speaking to, amidst the gratuitous sex and amidst the quasi rebellion kind of rhetoric. There's a powerful spiritual message that is kind of like encapsulated by that kind of that pill of pop culture that many people are able to get even without necessarily cognitively processing it. Just let it absorb and just know, I feel nice when I hear this, because it's affirmational, it's further positive, even amidst the confusing, the the convoluted sexual influence and additionally in manipulation from Bob Marley, but also from the mechanics of how his music is distributed, liberalism, sexual exploitation, and utilizing sexual energy and sexual charisma for the purpose of selling the records to the women, particularly to brethren affiliated with the women and otherwise. So, but amidst all of that, there's still a pill of healing that is not available in other ways because there's just woeful corruption. So when people receive that, people just know, yo, when I feel this, I feel Irie. Play that again. Let's smoke some herb and play that again. And then a number of people amidst that group listen further to the politics and be like, okay, yo, this is it. But they even listen further to the spiritual message and then say, who is this cat? Haile Selassie I. Where is Bob Marley getting this from? What is he talking about his master? Who is he talking about his teacher? What is this thing saying about war? And when kinfolk do that further research, then they find the teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie I. That's not mass-produced in the way that the music of Bob Marley is, and that's not a dig, that's not shade. It's just this is the actuality. It's not as mass-produced. It's not as marketable. It's not as manipulatable. And that's a significant thing right there. There is a sovereignty, an independent, autonomous sovereignty within the example and the teachings of Haile Selassie I, which is one of the reasons why it's not as significantly advocated and mass distributed, because even the companies, even though music companies or publishers or whatever else could make lots of money, can't even talk about millions these days because what's millions, make lots of money doing that. The challenge, though, is that in doing it, all those nations, all those constructs of government that establish the laws of incorporation for those companies to exist, all the companies have to be incorporated someplace in order to be sanctioned and approved by any particular nation and in dealing with other nations. So all those governments that allow the corporations to be established in their auspices are severely challenged by the teachings and example of His Majesty Haile Selassie I, and thus there's an intrinsic and intentional aversion and hindrance, obstruction of forwarding those teachings. It's limited. Weak art shall not prosper. The truth is inevitable. Truth, if you like that too, truth is inevitable and continually manifesting. So. It's a different nature than the popular culture, though. So that's one of the reasons why companies, music companies, publishing companies, and otherwise have a challenge, even when wanting to promote and market the teachings of His Majesty. The teachings of His Majesty won't allow themselves, the teachings won't allow to be manipulated, to be copyrighted, to be claimed ownership, just like Ethiopia itself. And by the grace of the Most High. So that's one reason. And then also the standing governments that incorporate or allow the companies to be incorporated stand to lose a significant amount of authority, credibility, influence, leverage upon the teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie I being shared with formally, institutionally, in becoming regular inclusions within curricula and focal points of curricula as examples of how to be in this life. It's difficult to hear many criticisms that come from convention towards Haile Selassie, which is extremely interesting. To be honest, my knowledge, my literacy about the contemporary writings or critiques about Haile Selassie during his lifetime, I'm less privy to. I'm less literate. I have yet to see anything coming from convention. Actually, I haven't seen much coming from any source that is critical of Haile Selassie. Obviously, there's a huge disagreement with him and challenge within Ethiopia to precipitate what happens in terms of his of kinfolk removing kinfolk from office and otherwise. So that shows, history shows how egregious that regime is and how wrongful that regime is in that action, and just proves further the legitimacy and truth within the example and the teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie, which is likely one of the reasons why no other world powers have any inclination of saying anything negative about him. Mussolini already tried. Europe already tried by being quiet when Mussolini was chopping at the mouth. That was during the day. And the nature of a martyr is amplified upon returning home and walking with the Most High. So if there's no evidence, very little evidence of any world leader, any critic, any journalist or whatever having much of anything negative or critical to say about His Majesty Haile Selassie, how much less so today, when the level of credibility and otherwise of world leaders and such people who occupy such positions is much further compromised and much less credible. To do such critique only is inviting earthquakes, thunder, and lightning. And we're talking about the nature of truth at this point. And it's not threats, it's not trying to it's not challenging, but we're articulating conditions. So there may be rife critics or whatever of Haile Selassie during this time. We do see haters. We do see people who kind of want to reshape or twist history or whatever else for different reasons or different motivations. But again, it shows itself either immediately or eventually. And in showing itself, it further substantiates the truth within the example. So there is that inevitability of the teachings and example of His Majesty Haile Selassie being further knowledgeable amongst a larger number of people than the lyrics and the message of Bob Marley. And that's actually arguably the intention of Bob Marley. But to just imagine that culture, recognizing what it is today, looking at like the documentary like Marley, that chronicles Bob Marley's life, produced by the eldest son of Bob Marley, and just seeing how this was about 10 years ago, actually, to be honest, about 15 years ago at this point. So it's somewhat recent, but now it's at some point somewhat dated, but it's presumably still very similar. If one goes around the world, one finds youth, young people, still know the lyrics to Bob Marley songs, know them by heart, sing them, are ready with it. That's powerful. That's significant. Today, going, like I said, I know personally, going to the streets and talking to kinfolk I've seen for the first time in life, saying they know who Bob Marley is. They fucks with Bob Marley. That's powerful. It's over 40 years since Bob Marley walks these roads of creation. And the youth, whose parents might not have even been born at that point, 40 years ago, youth, them, know and love Bob Marley, the streets. That's powerful. That's significant. That's beyond the propaganda and the distribution machines. So that's today. That's today. Even just one or two generations from the days of Bob Marley and Haile Selassie. That's today. And that's around the world. India, Japan, Jamaica, Kenya, Tunisia, England, France, Tibet, around the world, Brazil, the land of Guarani, and around this continent, East Coast, West Coast, and the plains, Bob Marley is known and loved. His music is loved and sung by kinfolk on the streets. That's today. Now, recognizing what today is, the culture, this and the other, however we perceive today, to imagine, to recognize an actuality, a culture, a condition, an environment where people are further familiar with Haile Selassie than Bob Marley. We can look at a spectrum. We can look at like two versions, two scenarios. One version is where like the world society is further literate, further peaceful, further supports and invests and values teachings of peace and reconciliation around the world amongst the different cultures, and because of that, proactively promotes and teaches the example and the teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie I. So it's in mainstream curriculum, from kindergarten all the way to advanced centers in academia, PhDs, think tanks, consortia, and otherwise, based upon the teachings of His Majesty. That's like a favorable scenario, to the point where that's what people knowledge. That is the common knowledge. That's the common experience. Like a Grundtvig in Denmark, a Dag Hammarskjöld, somewhat so, in Sverige, a contemporary of His Majesty Haile Selassie I. And like other similar legends who exemplify certain principles that are valued and cherished within our culture of the world and our respective cultures regionally. So that's one scenario of people being children, youth, and the common person being further familiar with the example and teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie I. Another scenario is where it's perhaps less as favorable, less peaceful, and additionally, whereby things become further woefully corrupt, where youth don't listen to anything except ignorance, and there's little patience for social consciousness or whatever else, because it's just perceived as just feudal bullshit. What are you talking about revolution? For what? Shut the fuck up. Just give me some this and that, and I want to feel nice. Where's the women? Be gone, women. We're done now. Da 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 da. Like the depths of that decay, where the kinfolk on the streets in the hood, and additionally, like even further than it is at the moment, are very intolerant of spiritual message, even from Bob Marley. What you talking about? All that old stuff. Give me that new, whatever is being pumped today, whatever is being pushed on the corners today. And in that scenario, the message of Bob Marley is scant. A small number of people still listen, still sing, still know, still love Bob Marley. Still known, small pockets here and there. However, at the same time, quiet is kept. There's also, at that same time, amidst that depravity and decay, there are increasing numbers of people who are preparing to inherit the world, who are studying the teachings of the world, including those of His Majesty Haile Selassie I. And in doing that, now we got somebody chopping at the mouth now. All right. It sounds like the usual suspect, but it don't look like the usual suspects. So we'll just do this, because it seems like they're going to be talking for a while and they're insisting upon that. So we're just going to continue this. It's going to be like this at the moment. So in that scenario of the pervasive decay, fewer people are knowledgeable. It's not a massive, well-known thing around the world. That is the music of Bob Marley. People are just involved in whatever is the most recent stuff, just like drugs and everything else on the streets. That's what people care about. Some people still know, some people still love, but it's not the same. It's not the same numbers. It's not the same resonance. And that's the nature of the charisma too. Even substantive based charisma. That's the nature. Now at the same time, like I say, simultaneously, exactly at the same time, there are people, formally and informally, on the record and off the record, who are preparing, who are studying the righteousness of all the cultures, of all the languages, of all the teachers who are preparing to receive and practice the authority of the world, and have to have a literacy about the history, about the teachings, about the leaders and the legends of the world. From China to India to Afghanistan to Israel to Brazil, Guarani, to California, to France and Uganda, Kenya, and further. Kinfolk have a necessity to study the world and have a proficiency in studying the world. And in doing that, kinfolk around the world are increasingly literate, familiar, versed, attuned, and disciplined within the teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie and Her Majesty Waizara in perfect balance. These are quiet circles. Significantly, these are formal circles and formal institutions of learning that need to keep up with that literacy if they want to continue to be relevant or even continue to exist in future generations. It is a necessity. World literacy is a necessity for any institution that has intentionality of existing. And that world literacy includes prominently the example and teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie, such that even in those small circles, the informal circles, off-grid circles, low-key, non-English speaking circles, and in the prominent elite non-English speaking circles of formal education, formal institutions, formal academia, ivory towers in the Ivory Coast, and additionally, there is a greater knowledge and familiarity and practice, heeding, discipline of those teachings, further than the familiarity with Bob Marley and the music of Bob Marley. Now, those are two scenarios, and there's a spectrum in between as well. And the consideration is that the first scenario that I describe happens in a long-term process. It takes a while for that to happen. And that's, like I said, that's a favorable process. Without like the severe decay of world civilization. It's the gradual progression and evolution. That's that first scenario. In the second scenario, where the numbers are much further reduced, the numbers are much further reduced. That is anticipated as a further expedient scenario, a further quick occurring scenario, that eventually, gradually asserts itself and settles in for the long term. But either way, there is that eventuality, not just of the example and teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie exceeding or being further well known than the music of Bob Marley, the message of Bob Marley. It's even further in the terms of the teachings and example of His Majesty Haile Selassie and Waizara Manin being a mainstay of world literacy for all groups, for all cultures, and particularly for those that have some type of intention in sitting at the world table of sovereignty, and having some type of standing and influence, leverage, or whatever else, particularly having those latter elements of leverage or influence or otherwise. It requires a literacy specifically of the example and the teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie. That's the basic mathematics. And as we said before, like, we're not the enemies. We're not here for conquest. We're not here to take over anything. We're here to share truth and share message. And one way of looking at us is simply a matter of we are here to continue to clean up the mess after the annihilations and the devastations the obliterations. We are here to stay low, be humble, be honest, be compassionate. Keep a distance from the decay, keep a distance from the dishonesty. And when the smoke clears from all the warfare and antagonisms, as it periodically does, to help and clean, to help heal afterwards. So when kinfolk start kicking up dust and getting loud and ignorant and belligerent and hostile and violent and otherwise, like I said, we gotta work and be disciplined and not responding with similar ignorance and hostilities, and instead be balanced, be moderate, be patient, be steadfast, be truthful, be compassionate, and be modest, and be ready when the time occurs for healing and rebuilding, as it always does from the beginning. That is who we are. That is what we do. So, like it or not, we're not intending provocation. We're not intending antagonism. Some people have been conditioned to perceiving any kind of disagreement to be antagonism or hatred or otherwise. We try to educate as much as possible. We recognize that very often there's a limit to how much people are willing to listen and rationalize things, and so at some point it just becomes either distance or discipline and taking a stand. So there's a predatory nature within human beings. That's understandable. There's a self-predatory nature in terms of feeding off of one's own kind. So there's a continual sniffing for weakness and victimization, like hyenas. And so it's a continual resilience that kinfolk need to practice in response to the adversities within the forest. And that's the nature of it. Not to get mad, again, not to blame, and not to try to get punished, not to punish or get back at it, but just to keep a distance, endure as much as possible, and when need be, take a stand. We can lock kinfolk up. We can scoop up people. We can do things. We can inoculate and sequester kinfolk indefinitely when there are concerns of violence and otherwise. There are certain things that we're prohibited from doing too. So, anything else for the moment? The energy. It's like smelling like toxic cigarette smoke, like people's energy. Some energy is amazing, some energy is intoxicating, and some energy is just poison because of what people are consuming. So that when people voice that energy, particularly men with the bass voice that energy, you can tell what they've been smoking, what they've been drinking, what they've been injecting, what they've been watching, what they've been emitting, and otherwise. That energy. And we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Can't speak of what other people feel in terms of experiencing my energy. A lot of people communicate healing and feeling the healing just in the presence. Some kinfolk communicate disdain and discomfort, but oftentimes that's often a consequence of people's own personal dissonance, and even then, people recognizing that even if some stillness within myself, being uncomforted or uneasy by that because experiencing further guilt about the activity that kinfolk are doing. We do our best not to be hateful, not to be antagonistic, and not to be toxic. Now, we can't will that just by where we are. It's a matter of living that, what we eat, what we consume, what we watch, what we listen to, what we pay mind to. All that factors into the energy that we emit. involuntarily, just by living and breathing. And then it's further amplified through our words, the vibration of our voice, and our actions. So even regardless of what we're speaking, just like when you know somebody's talking bullshit, they can be smiling and everything else, but they fake as fuck. You can feel it because they're not living whatever they're saying. And so regardless of how nicely they're dressed or how big their smile is and everything else, how friendly their words are, it's like, yo, bullshit, shut the fuck up, you fake ass motherfucker. Because you feel that. They're not living it. And when somebody says, yo, shut the fuck up, you laugh and smile because they just said some nasty shit. But at the same time, you feel that they don't hate you. They don't feel, and you don't feel antagonism from them. Now, the N word is a whole nother thing, because that's significantly indoctrinated self-hatred, where people try to communicate love and affection in a genuine way through a severe terrorism that has been embedded within people's hearts. I won't say souls, but people's hearts, minds, and bodies. So they think that self-affliction is love, because too fearful of looking at how it started. And actually, that's one other thing to share as well. For kinfolk who think of like the world being like controlled by white people, if you think that, first of all, that's not the case. Again, it's the imperialism is a phenomenon beyond any color. And if there's a perception of white people controlling things or whatever, it's just a shell. White people are enslaved. Whoever you think is as a power or whatever, they're enslaved. The people who are employing the brethren right now to cause up static and kick up dust by venting this vitriol, even just by this happenstance kind of like voice, even towards myself, that accusation towards myself. Those kinfolk are slaves. It's not even just a matter of being punk cowards. Those kinfolk are slaves. They are enslaved even by earthly forces, but particularly from the spirit world. Kinfolk are enslaved. So it's not a white-black thing. It's not an ethnic thing. It is a spirit and earth thing. It is a primordial existence thing, and it manifests itself in different colors. So understand how the game works if you're going to be talking about it with any intentionality of honesty. And if you don't know, better ask somebody rather than presuming, because ain't as much room for error these days. Stakes is high. De la soul. So, that being communicated, we feel the energy around ourselves, within others, around ourselves, and it's not something to fake. People can be pimpy-ishous about it and smooth and manipulative, but they're basically doing that. They're causing any confusion or misdirection kinfolk cause in that respect is actually basically just building that from our own dishonesty and our own selfishness, and utilizing our own selfishness to cloud our receptors about being able to detect bullshit and non-bullshit. So it's our own doing. But by and large, you can feel people's energy. When you are attuned with your own energy and when you're honest with it to a proficient degree, you can feel the energy of others and what they say. And beyond all the nonverbal cues of like looking down or looking away or whatever else, those can be telling, but those also can be misleading as well. Some people are extremely honest and at the same time extremely pious. And so those cues that make them look like they're being passive or recessive or even dishonest, looking away or whatever else, be careful, because a lot of those interpretations, psychology and otherwise, are the translations of predatory minds that have predatory intentions and predatory behavior and interpret the behavior of others in predatory terms. And very often they can be effective for the purposes of being continually predatory, but in progressing in an existence beyond the predatory through generations, they become actually very dangerous, self-dangerous for oneself, of relying upon it because it's inaccurate. It doesn't account for the totality of experience. And that, when we talk about scientific probabilities, in addition to that small percentage of like outside of the conclusive probability, that small percentage becomes further large. That small percentage of piety, and additionally, becomes further large. So that when people make those presumptions that were like 80% accurate for most kind of interactions than encountering somebody who's actually pious or lives in a different way where that translation is completely inaccurate. You read it completely wrong. The consequences are often 100%. That's why it's beneficial to be careful. It's beneficial to be modest and honest in our walk continually, so that when we make any inaccurate presumptions, there's flexibility. We're already modest. We're not imposing ourselves that much, excessively or otherwise. So when we make inaccuracies, there's further forgiveness. There's further, and that's not fortuitous interpretation. That's just the nature of things. And it's not a guarantee. One can be as pious as can be and make a slight little inaccuracy, and that can be 100% right there. But generally speaking, when one is modest and humble and known for that, and even beyond being known for that, but just thorough, there's further flexibility in inaccuracies, because there's recognition. Okay, yeah, they're not trying to take over, and they're not trying to conquer us. They weren't trying to come at us like that. Yeah, they might have been a little bit inaccurate here, but that's not that deep. All right, that's all right. Yeah, they're not part of us still. No, we can't let them do that. But yeah, they're not on that side either. So they don't trip on that too hard. So that's in terms of interpreting behavior, actions with a predatory lens and with a transcendent lens beyond predatoriness. And again, when reading the energy, we do best in reading the energy of others when we cultivate a peacefulness and tranquility within ourselves, thorough. We can cultivate a tranquility amongst ourselves, amongst our own kind, so that we can be comfortable amongst our own kind, however you define that, ethnicity, religion, or otherwise. But if the nature of that tranquility does not translate, it doesn't equate to tranquility of others outside of our kind, it can be increasingly dissonant, it can be increasingly hostile, it can be increasingly victimized by people outside of that fold. When we cultivate a tranquility that is increasingly compatible and harmonious with the tranquility of others, then we are able to see the true heart of others beyond the biases and prejudices and stereotypes and propaganda and whatever else. Do I say shibboleth again? There it is. When we cultivate a tranquility that is increasingly universal and compatible with the tranquility of others, the genuine tranquility that is even taught within our own respective traditions, we better see the heart and we better feel the energy of those who come from that tranquility, amidst all of the misinterpretations and inaccuracies and otherwise. So what we do to optimize the tranquility within the energy that we share, the peacefulness that people feel. Again, we're not perfect. We do things that cause harm to others. We try to minimize that as much as possible, but we're not perfect. But things we do to cultivate that peacefulness, so that when we do this, people feel like this is genuine. But beyond us saying any word, cats from all different walks. Let the streets be the witness. Let the village, let the world be the witness of what I communicate. When we share that, people feel the energy. They may look at me, see my face, see me, whatever, whether I have this torn up t-shirt, scraggly shirt, brown skin, light skin, or whatever. Kinfolk may be all types of against wherever they think I'm coming from personally, or wherever people think we're coming from. But at the same time, when they feel the energy, they can't lie to themselves about that. They can fake the funk and pretend otherwise to us and anybody else. But they know, by the grace of the Most High, who and what we are, to some degree. And that don't happen by a smiley face. That don't happen by just snapping a finger and being that. It's not acting. It's living. I can't hide it one way or the other. We can't hide it one way or the other. So what we do to cultivate that universal tranquility amongst all the different cultures, very basic, simple stuff. Again, living very modestly. I have not filled a tax form. I'm not a citizen. I don't own anything. And I haven't filled a tax form in over 20 years. Don't make money. Live basically off rice at the moment. Don't have to, but recognize anytime we get sustenance, anytime we get materiality, we got to pay a cost. We got to do some type of dirt that causes harm towards others. It doesn't have to necessarily be blood, but we have to do some kind of dirt, whether it's putting our hands in the soil and planting seeds, whether it's cleaning something or whatever. But we have to do something. And anyway, so in the meanwhile, in the process of stabilizing the home front, in family and village, we live modestly. We focus our indulgences, our excesses, as I said before, in attunement, in rhythm with our rituals, seasonal. So it's not just partying when we can. That's difficult when things are severe. Things have been comparatively severe in recent months. So we have resorted to somewhat of the windfall type of situation, and it hasn't even been that severe. But anyways, by and large, very modest, very, very modest lifestyle in terms of food, vestments, vêtements, is that the word, vêtements? Je dois parler français plus, je pense, n'est-ce pas? And further. So, something else here to say. So what else do we do? Health, water, plants. Veganism is very healthy, not just for the mind, but also for the peacefulness. And it's a universal dietary discipline. It has significant credibility within Kashrut, Judaism. It has significant credibility and resonance within Islam, Halal. It has significant credibility and resonance within India, Hindu, Jain, Buddhist. It has even credibility within China. Now, that being said, it also has tremendous suspicions in China, Africa, Europe. Increasingly indigenous cultures are increasingly suspicious of someone who doesn't eat meat. Now, ironically, and simultaneously within each of these increasingly indigenous cultures, the regularity is not to eat meat, it's to eat grains, because the meat is very expensive. So there's actually a greater normalcy of a vegan diet within indigenous cultures, simply because of the economics. And the meat is shared or saved for special occasions, generally speaking. Recent generations, there's market conditions, and additionally that processed foods and everything else that affects the health, particularly within indigenous communities here. But by and large, the old school traditional communities that aren't necessarily vegan are effectively vegan, because that's just the economics. And so it's a matter of that attunement with that life and that way of being. And it's increasingly compatible across the board. In addition to that, again, being honest, being known for being honest, being fair, not haggling over prices. Whatever the price is, if we have it, if we can afford it, there it is. If not, then we have to find out something else. Not haggling, not bargaining in terms of trying to get over on people or whatever else. We trust people are going to give us what they consider to be a fair price. If they don't give us a fair price, then if we can afford it and it's not necessary, then we continue on with it, and we make a note, okay, maybe that's not the most fair person, because not just a matter of like paying a higher price, but maybe they try to cheat on other things. Maybe they've done a switch on the product. There's just anybody who does not the fair thing, it tends to be further susceptible to scrutiny about other different types of unscrupulous practices. So anyways, we worry less about that. We're very mindful of the things that we do purchase, quote unquote, in terms of, and again, we can use money. Don't have a savings account, but we can use money. But there's always a cost with that. So we try to do little as possible with that. Debit cards is another way of doing it. The gift cards, that is not actually legal currency, so it's technically not money. Some people might say, well, that's just skewing the lines or whatever, but we invite you to try it yourself and then talk about criticism. It's easy to point fingers. Anyways, those are some of the things we do, and in that, cultivate a peace of mind. Now, my spiritual practice personally, I'm working to get back on it. But that's another way of connecting with the heavens, connecting with the spirit realm, the dreaming, and receiving peace, receiving tranquility that is extremely potent within this life, within walking the roads of creation. And that takes daily practice: samadhi, yoga, davening, salat, um, prayers, yoga, and further. So, puja, korban, wada, that's revolutionary. But that is a way of cultivating the peace. So, anyways, I don't have to talk here. Brethren has been quieter since then, so I don't have to stand at the window like we was. Trying to discern whether I communicate what conditions are at the moment. I'll say it now because I probably may skip my recollection later. So we just communicate appreciation for the support, and it is increasingly evident, kinfolk being quietly supportive through the day today, and in recent days amidst the hostilities. And additionally, we know a number of kinfolk are conflicted about who we are, what we do, what we share, what we say. And like on one hand, like hearing some things that we say, like, yo, what the fuck is that? Who is this dude? That's why are you listening to that? And then literally like the next minute being like, yo, that was amazing. Wow, how can that be? That's exactly what this dude is like. Truth. Hallelujah. We know that's how kinfolk receive what we say. A lot of kinfolk receive what we say. And we communicate, again, emphasize, we do our best, and we just be honest. And that's the price to pay. The awkwardness, the accusations, and additionally, it's difficult. It's tenacious, and it don't stop. It's for life. This is it. Everything we do, which is why we try to do, like we generally do as little as possible, because anything we do, we got to answer for. Why'd you do that? What's going on with that? That's the nature of sovereignty. That's the weight of being a king and queen in this life. Everything is scrutinized. Everything is questioned. Everything is challenged. I said before, a man who reaches a certain spiritual awakening in this life, recognizing every woman in his presence is soliciting marriage. What? Yes. And at the same time, every male in his presence is preparing to replace him. What is this dude on? Do you remember sovereignty? Do you remember what it's like to be the king? That's what it is. And we're talking about it in a society of 350 million people. Hyper interactions on a regular basis. All different types of intertwinements of paths. That's a word. Intertwinements. You heard it here. And so part of our purpose in this life as men, talking from this experience, is to reconcile with that. That's a very difficult actualization to maintain in the forefront of one's mindfulness and walking and interacting with all of the beings. Because there's an implicit, seemingly intrinsic hierarchy or subordination within that, of like that what's it called? That thing from Scotland. There can only be one. What's that called? Back in the 80s. It'd be not the hirelings. Wow. Highlanders. That's what it is. There can only be one. Meaning, I mean, that's a reference right there. But it would be a little bit difficult to explain, particularly because my familiarity is comparatively modest. But the idea is like these beings that just walk on the earth are like eternal beings. Again, we're getting into the angel realm or whatever, but at the same time, like there can only be one, and so they can only kill each other. Only they can kill each other. I think that's how it was. But whenever they met one, like that was it. It was on. So meanwhile, they live life and interact with other people on a regular basis. But when they find one of their own, it's on. Now, we're not claiming to be that, but that can be the perception when I can articulate that awakening of every woman being Eve in my realm. And that applies to every man, and every man in the realm being the replacement for myself. Redundancy, what they say in the lower lands, the lowlanders. So the teachings from the Most High Elohim provide us guidance of moderation and balance, reconciliation, coexistence, how we live in this garden together, simultaneous as sovereigns as well as brethren and sistren, continually progressing to the experience of garden, essentially being light, and returning to our essence of our heavenly existence as spirit beings, released from earthly matter and earthly matters. What up? So we're getting further signals of wrapping up amidst the continual support. So I'm riffing at this point, and we've said the basics of what to share. The concluding joint about an hour ago, nearly, I think, was just to talk about Haile Selassie I, and I won't say eclipsing the popularity or familiarity of Bob Marley, because it's not a competition, but just recognizing the nature, and particularly recognizing the temporal conditions within such experiences, the eventuality of such conditions, and working continually towards supporting, manifesting, preparing, growing the experiences and conditions which we are generally inclined to recognize as most healthy, most favorable for all beings. With that being said, we give all thanks and praise to the Most High. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari.